The morning light filtered through the curtains of their bedroom as Michael Hayes watched his wife, Elena, get ready for work. It was their 10th anniversary, and he'd been planning this day for months, or rather, planning for what this day would reveal. "Coffee's ready," he called from the doorway, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Elena turned, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Thanks, honey. Listen, I need to talk to you about tonight." Michael's grip tightened on his mug. Here it comes, he thought. For 3 weeks, private investigator David Chen had been sending him reports, photos, timestamps. He knew what was coming, but hearing it from her lips would make it real. "I know we planned dinner at Marcello's," Elena began, fidgeting with her earring, "but I was thinking, maybe we could do something different this year." "Different how?" Michael kept his tone neutral, almost curious. She sat on the edge of their bed, the same bed where they'd whispered dreams and promises for a decade. "I feel like we've been in such a routine lately. Everything's become so predictable. I need a night to clear my head, to remember who I am outside of being a wife, a marketing director, all these roles I play." Michael set down his coffee, afraid he might crush the ceramic. "You want to spend our anniversary apart?" "Just the evening," she said quickly. "I could go to that spa in the city, get a massage, have some quiet time. We could celebrate tomorrow instead. Would that be okay?" The irony wasn't lost on him. She was asking permission to meet her lover on their anniversary while pretending it was about self-care. David's last report had been crystal clear. Elena had been meeting someone every Thursday evening for the past 2 months at the Riverside Hotel. Tonight was Thursday. "If that's what you need," Michael heard himself say. The words tasted like ash. Relief washed over Elena's face. She crossed the room and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for understanding. You're amazing, you know that." As she gathered her things and headed for the door, she paused. "Oh, and Michael? I love you. I know I don't say it enough lately, but I do." The door clicked shut behind her, and Michael stood alone in their bedroom, surrounded by photos of their life together. Their wedding in Maui. Hiking in Yosemite. Last Christmas with his parents. Every image a fragment of what he'd thought was real. His phone buzzed. A text from David, confirmed. Subject made reservation at Riverside Hotel, room 412, 7 p.m. Third party expected same time. "What's your call?" Michael's hands trembled as he typed back, "Proceed with plan. I'll be there at 7:30. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Michael went through the motions at his architecture firm, reviewing blueprints without really seeing them, attending meetings where his mind was miles away. His colleague, Jennifer, noticed. "You okay, Mike? You seem distracted." "Just anniversary jitters," he lied with a practiced smile. 10 years, right? That's impressive these days. You guys doing something special?" "You could say that," Michael replied, the double meaning clear only to him. "It'll definitely be a night to remember." By 6 o'clock, Michael was parked 3 blocks from the Riverside Hotel. David had briefed him on everything, the layout, the timing, the logistics. Room 412 had been accidentally booked with a key that wouldn't work properly, a favor from the hotel manager who owed David from a previous case. It would give Michael the element of surprise. His phone lit up with a text from Elena, at the spa. "Feeling better already. Love you. Red heart hash." Michael stared at the heart emoji, this small symbol that had once meant everything, now just another lie in a constellation of deception. He thought about their vows, the promises they'd made in front of everyone they loved. For better or worse. In sickness and in health. Forsaking all others. At 7:25 p.m., Michael stepped out of his car. The evening air was cool against his face as he walked toward the hotel entrance, carrying with him a folder of evidence, a recording device, and the shattered remains of the life he'd built. 3 weeks earlier, Michael had been a different man, naive, trusting, content in his ignorance. The unraveling had started with something small, as it always does. Elena had begun working late on Thursdays. Every single Thursday for 2 months. As head of marketing at a tech startup, irregular hours weren't unusual, but the pattern was too consistent. Then came the new perfume, the carefully selected outfits on those specific evenings, the way she'd started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. Michael had ignored these signs at first, made excuses. She's stressed at work. She's going through something. Maybe it's a midlife crisis. But the night he'd woken at 2 a.m. to find her texting someone, her face illuminated by the screen's glow and wearing an expression he hadn't seen in years. Joy, excitement, anticipation. He couldn't deny it anymore. The next morning, he'd called David Chen. David had been recommended by a divorced colleague who said, "If you need to know the truth, he'll find it. Just be prepared, you can't unknow what he discovers." Their first meeting had been in David's modest office above a Chinese restaurant. David was 50-something, with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst. "Before we start," David had said, "I have to ask, are you sure you want to know? Some marriages survive uncertainty better than they survive truth." Michael had nodded firmly. "I need to know." David had outlined his process: surveillance, digital forensics if necessary, documentation of everything. "I don't make judgments, Mr. Hayes. I just collect facts. What you do with them is your choice." The first report had come 3 days later. Elena had gone to a wine bar called Vintage on Thursday evening. She'd met a man, tall, well-dressed, approximately 40 years old. They'd sat close, talked intensely, laughed frequently. No physical contact beyond a brief hug, hello and goodbye. Duration: 2 hours and 15 minutes. Could be a colleague, David had noted. Could be innocent. But Michael had seen the photos. The way Elena leaned in when she spoke. The way she touched her hair. The radiance in her expression. That wasn't how you looked at a colleague. Week 2's report had been more damning. Same wine bar, same man. This time, David had managed to get closer, capture audio. Their conversation had been peppered with inside jokes, references to past meetings Michael knew nothing about. At one point, the man, David had identified him as Marcus Webb, an advertising executive, had taken Elena's hand across the table. "I've missed you," Marcus had said. "It's only been a week," Elena had replied, laughing. "That's 7 days too long." Michael had listened to that recording a dozen times, each playback a fresh wound. The intimacy in their voices was undeniable. Week 3 had brought the inevitable conclusion. Elena and Marcus had left the wine bar together, walked 2 blocks to the Riverside Hotel, and checked in. David's timestamp: 7:47 p.m. They'd emerged at 11:32 p.m. Elena's clothes had been slightly disheveled, her hair no longer perfectly styled. David had laid out the photos on his desk like a dealer spreading cards. "This is usually where clients ask me to stop," he'd said quietly. "They've confirmed their suspicions. The rest is just pain." But Michael had shaken his head. "Keep going. I need everything documented for when I confront her." "When are you planning to do that?" Michael had picked up one of the photos, Elena and Marcus entering the hotel, his hand on the small of her back in a gesture of intimate familiarity. "Our anniversary. It's in 2 weeks. If she's brazen enough to keep seeing him up until then, she deserves the surprise." David had studied him carefully. "What are you planning, Mr. Hayes?" "Just a conversation. With witnesses and evidence. I want her to know I'm not a fool, and I want him to know there are consequences." The final 2 weeks had been surreal. Michael had continued his normal routine, kissing Elena goodbye each morning, asking about her day, making love to her on the nights when she was in the mood, though those had become increasingly rare. All while knowing exactly where she'd been and what she'd done. He'd felt like an actor in a play, reading lines while a completely different story unfolded in his head. The hardest part wasn't the anger. Anger was clean, simple. It was the moments when Elena would do something familiar and dear, like bring him coffee in bed or laugh at one of his terrible jokes, and he'd remember why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Those moments made him question everything. Was he being too harsh? Should he give her a chance to explain before this public confrontation? But then he'd remember her lies, the calculated deception, the way she'd looked at Marcus in those photos, and his resolve would harden. Now, standing in the Riverside Hotel lobby, Michael checked his watch. 7:28 p.m. David was already in position on the 4th floor with his camera. The hotel manager had been briefed. Everything was ready. Michael's phone buzzed with a final text from David, both subjects in room. Your move. Michael stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor, watching the numbers climb with a strange sense of detachment. In a few minutes, everything would change. There would be no going back to the comfortable lives they'd both been living. The 4th floor hallway was quiet, carpeted in deep burgundy that muffled Michael's footsteps. Room 412 was at the far end, and with each step, his heart hammered harder against his ribs. David Chen emerged from the stairwell, camera in hand, and gave Michael a subtle nod. They've been inside for 12 minutes, David whispered. Are you ready for this? Michael's throat was dry. I've been ready for 3 weeks. David handed him a key card. Managers override. But remember, no violence, no threats. Just truth. That's what we agreed. Michael took the key, its plastic edge sharp against his palm. He'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in his mind, but now that it was here, his carefully prepared words seemed inadequate. What do you say to someone who's methodically destroyed your trust while sleeping beside you every night? He swiped the card. The light flashed green. He turned the handle. The room was dim, lit only by the city lights filtering through sheer curtains. In that first frozen moment, Michael's eyes adjusted to reveal the scene. Elena stood by the window, but she wasn't in someone's arms. She was holding a phone, looking startled. And she was alone. Michael. Her voice was sharp with surprise and confusion. What are you doing here? How did you? Where is he? Michael's voice came out harder than he'd intended. He moved further into the room, David following with the camera rolling. Where's Marcus? Elena's face went pale. Marcus? What are you talking about? What is this? Don't. Michael held up his hand. Don't insult me with more lies. I know you've been meeting him. Every Thursday for 2 months. I know you came here together. I have photos, timestamps, everything. Elena's eyes widened, then darted to David and his camera. You had me followed? You hired a private investigator. Answer the question. Where is Marcus Webb? Elena seemed to struggle for words, her composure cracking. Michael, this isn't what you think. Then tell me what it is. Michael pulled out his phone, swiping through photos David had sent him. Is this not you at Vintage Wine Bar with Marcus? Is this not you entering this hotel with him 3 times? Is this not you lying about working late, about spa appointments, about needing to clear your head on our anniversary? Elena's hands were shaking now. She set down her phone and moved toward him. Please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been cheating on me. How you've been lying to my face every single day. Michael's voice rose despite his intentions. Do you have any idea what these past 3 weeks have been like? Knowing the truth but pretending everything was fine? Watching you get ready to meet him, kissing you goodbye, all while knowing you were going to him. Tears began streaming down Elena's face. Michael, please. It's not an affair. Marcus is. The bathroom door opened. Michael spun around, adrenaline surging, ready to finally confront the man who'd been sleeping with his wife. But the person who emerged wasn't Marcus Webb. It was a woman. She was in her mid-30s, with Elena's same dark hair and similar features, wearing jeans and a blouse. She stopped when she saw Michael, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something like resignation. Oh, she said softly. This isn't how we wanted you to find out. Michael stared, his brain struggling to process this deviation from the script he'd written. Who are you? Elena stepped forward, her voice breaking. Michael, this is Sophie. She's my sister. The words didn't make sense. Michael shook his head. You don't have a sister. You're an only child. No, Elena whispered. I'm not. The room seemed to tilt. Michael looked between the two women, seeing now what he'd missed before, the unmistakable resemblance, the same curve of the jaw, the same dark eyes. "I don't understand," he managed. Sophie moved to stand beside Elena, and in that moment, their similarity was striking. "Maybe I should go," Sophie said to Elena. "Let you two talk." "No." Elena caught her hand. "No, you've been a secret long enough. Michael deserves to know everything." She turned to him, and the anguish in her face was raw and real. "Can we sit down? Please?" Michael, still reeling, nodded mechanically. David had lowered his camera, sensing that something far different from an affair was unfolding. They all sat, Michael on the edge of the bed, Elena and Sophie on the small sofa by the window. "I was 3 years old when Sophie was born," Elena began, her voice hoarse. "My parents, our parents, weren't ready for another child. They were struggling financially, emotionally. My father had just lost his job. My mother was drinking heavily." Sophie continued the story, her voice quiet but steady. "They made a decision. They gave me up for adoption. A private arrangement with a family friend who couldn't have children. The Webbs, Marcus and Julia Webb. Marcus Webb is your brother." Michael's world was still spinning. "Adoptive brother," Sophie clarified. "We're not blood-related. When I turned 33, I started searching for my birth family. It took me almost 3 years, but I found Elena 6 months ago." Elena's tears were flowing freely now. "She contacted me through one of those DNA ancestry sites. At first, I didn't believe it. My parents had never told me I had a sister. When I confronted them, they finally admitted the truth. They made me promise not to tell anyone, not you, not your family, no one. They were ashamed, terrified of being judged." So the Thursday meetings. Michael was beginning to understand. "Were me getting to know the sister I never knew I had," Elena finished. "I wanted to tell you so badly, Michael. Every single day. But I'd promised my parents, and they were so fragile about it. My mother started having panic attacks every time I brought it up. And the more time passed, the harder it became to explain why I'd kept it secret." Michael looked at David, who had quietly set down his camera. The investigator's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, perhaps recognition of a truth he'd missed, or sympathy for the complexity of human relationships that couldn't be captured in photographs and timestamps. "The hotel," Michael said, still piecing it together. "Why meet here?" Sophie answered, "I live in Portland. I've been flying down every week or two. The hotel was neutral ground, private. We'd talk for hours, sharing our lives, trying to build a relationship. Marcus, my adoptive brother, he'd sometimes come with me for support. He's been wonderful through this whole thing." "The photos of you holding hands," Michael said to Elena. "Your intimacy with him." "He was comforting me," Elena said. "I just learned that mine and Sophie's, biological father has cancer. Stage 4. Sophie was helping me process it, decide whether to try to build a relationship with him before it's too late." Michael sat in silence, watching his entire narrative collapse. For 3 weeks, he'd been so certain of his story, the unfaithful wife, the betrayed husband, the righteous confrontation. But life, as always, was more complicated than the stories we tell ourselves. "Why tonight?" he finally asked. "Why ask to spend our anniversary apart?" Elena's voice broke completely. "Because Sophie's leaving tomorrow to go back to Portland for a month. Tonight might be my last chance to see her for a while. And because..." She covered her face with her hands. "Because I've been such a coward. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have trusted you. Instead, I kept digging myself deeper into lies, and I didn't know how to get out." The hotel room fell into a heavy silence. Michael stood abruptly, needing to move, to think, to process. He walked to the window and stared out at the city lights, each one a small world with its own complications and secrets. "I need to understand," he said, his back still to them. "Take me through it. All of it. From the beginning." Elena and Sophie exchanged glances. Sophie nodded, giving her sister permission to speak. "Last April," Elena began, I got an email through the Ancestry website. Sophie had uploaded her DNA results and we'd matched as siblings. I thought it was a mistake. I called my mother immediately. Michael turned to face them. Even now, he could hear the pain in Elena's voice, see the exhaustion in her face. He thought of all the times over the past months when she'd seemed distant, distracted. He'd interpreted it as falling out of love with him, when really she'd been grappling with a revelation that rewrote her entire family history. "What did your mother say?" "She denied it at first. Then she hung up on me. Wouldn't answer my calls for 3 days." Elena's hands twisted in her lap. When she finally called back, she was hysterical. She told me everything, how they'd had Sophie, how desperate they were, how they convinced themselves they were giving her a better life. And then she begged me to keep it secret. "Why?" Michael asked. "Why the secrecy after all these years?" Sophie answered, her voice carrying an edge of old hurt. "Shame. Fear of judgment. My mother, our mother, has built her whole identity around being a pillar of the community. She volunteers at the church, runs the neighborhood association. The idea that people would know she gave up a child." Sophie shook her head. In her mind, it would destroy everything. "So you agreed to keep it secret," Michael said to Elena. "Even from me." "I know how it sounds," Elena said desperately. "But you have to understand, I was in shock. I suddenly had a sister, and my entire childhood was a lie. Everything I thought I knew about my family was wrong. My mother was falling apart, threatening to hurt herself if I told anyone. I didn't know what to do." Michael sat back down, but this time in the chair across from them, maintaining distance. "You could have told me. We've been married for 10 years, Elena. 10 years. Did you really think I'd judge you? Or your family?" "It wasn't about you judging me," Elena said quietly. "It was about me judging myself. I was angry at my parents for lying to me my whole life. I was angry at myself for even considering keeping their secret. I was angry that I suddenly had this sister, and I'd missed 33 years of knowing her. Every emotion was tangled up with every other one." David Chen, who had been standing silently by the door, spoke up. "Mr. Hayes, I've been in this business for 20 years. I've seen every kind of deception. What your wife did was wrong, the lying, the secrecy. But this." He gestured at the scene before them. "This is different from what we thought we were documenting." "Is it?" Michael's voice was sharp. "Still every single day for months. She looked me in the eye and lied." "You're right," Elena said, and her voice had changed, less pleading, more resolved. "You're absolutely right. I lied to you, and there's no excuse for that. I was a coward. I let my mother's fear become my fear. I let my own confusion paralyze me. And instead of trusting my husband, the man who's been by my side for a decade, I chose to protect people who were asking me to deny my own sister's existence." Sophie stood, grabbing her jacket. "I should leave. This is between you two." "Wait," Michael said. Sophie paused, her hand on her purse. "How much did you know? About Elena lying to me?" Sophie met his gaze directly. "Everything. I told her from the first week that she needed to tell you. That secrets like this poison relationships. But I also understood her position. Our mother can be manipulative. She's good at making her problems everyone else's emergency." "You met her?" Michael asked. "Their mother?" "Once," Sophie said. "It was a disaster. She cried, apologized, then asked me to disappear again for the sake of the family's reputation. That's when Elena and I realized we were on our own in this. If we wanted a relationship, it would have to be despite our parents, not because of them." Michael looked at Elena. "Is that why you seemed so stressed? Why you've been pulling away from me?" "Yes," Elena whispered. "I was trying to build a relationship with Sophie while managing my mother's breakdowns, while lying to you, while dealing with my own feelings about all of it. I felt like I was drowning, and I couldn't tell the one person who could help me because I'd already been lying for so long. How do you come home after 2 months and say, By the way, I have a sister and I've been secretly meeting her. You just do, Michael said. You trust that your marriage is strong enough to handle it. And what if I was wrong? Elena's voice broke again. What if you decided I was too damaged, too much of a liar, too complicated? What if I lost you too? The raw vulnerability in her voice cracked something in Michael's chest. He thought about the folder of evidence in his car, the careful documentation of every betrayal. He'd been so focused on being right, on catching her in her deception, that he hadn't stopped to consider what might drive his wife, his partner, his best friend, to such elaborate lies. I need some air, Michael said, standing. I need to think. Elena nodded, not trying to stop him. I understand. As Michael moved toward the door, Sophie spoke up. For what it's worth, Mr. Hayes, Elena talks about you constantly. How patient you are, how kind, how much she loves you. Every time we met, she'd start by saying, I should tell Michael. The guilt was eating her alive. Michael paused at the threshold. Then why didn't she? Because, Sophie said softly, sometimes we hurt the people we love most not in spite of loving them, but because we love them so much that our fear of losing them becomes paralyzing. Michael left the room without responding, David following him into the hallway. The hotel bar was nearly empty at 8:30 on a Thursday evening. Michael sat in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey he hadn't really tasted, while David sat across from him in companionable silence. The investigator had long since turned off his camera and put away his equipment. 20 years in this business, David finally said, and I've never had a case turn out quite like this one. Michael let out a hollow laugh. Join the club. For what it's worth, I believe them. The story checks out, I can verify it if you want. Adoption records, DNA results, all of it. I know it's true, Michael said. That's not the problem. Then what is? Michael stared into his glass. How do I trust her again? She looked me in the eye every day for months and lied. What's to stop her from doing it again the next time something difficult happens? David was quiet for a moment. May I tell you something personal? Michael nodded. My wife cheated on me 17 years ago. That's actually how I got into this business. The investigator I hired suggested I'd be good at it. David smiled wryly. I divorced her. I was furious, self-righteous. She begged for another chance, but I couldn't imagine forgiving her. The betrayal was too deep. Do you regret it? Every day, David said simply. Because 5 years later, I learned the whole story. She'd been sexually assaulted by her boss. She was ashamed, traumatized, didn't know how to tell me. She ended up having a brief affair with a coworker who showed her kindness, trying to feel anything other than broken. It wasn't an excuse, but it was context. And by the time I learned it, she'd remarried, moved across the country. I'd lost my chance to choose forgiveness. Michael met his eyes. You think I should forgive Elena? I think, David said carefully, that you should consider what you actually lost versus what you thought you lost. You thought you lost her love, her loyalty, her commitment to your marriage. But you didn't. You lost her honesty, and that matters, don't get me wrong. But the question is, was this a pattern of who she is, or was this a mistake driven by impossible circumstances? Before Michael could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Elena, I'm heading home. Sophie's flight is early tomorrow, so we said our goodbyes. I know you need space. Take all the time you need. I'll sleep in the guest room. I'm so sorry, Michael. For everything. Michael read it twice, then looked up at David. She's leaving. Sounds like it. Something shifted in Michael's chest. All his careful planning for this confrontation had included this moment. Elena caught, exposed, desperate. He'd imagined her pleading, making excuses. He'd imagined having the power, the moral high ground. But she wasn't pleading now. She was giving him space. Respecting his need to process. Even in the midst of her own crisis, she was thinking about what he needed. I need to go, Michael said abruptly, standing. Where? I don't know yet. Michael left the bar and found himself walking the city streets, his mind churning. He thought about their 10 years together. The way Elena laughed at his terrible cooking attempts. How she'd held his hand through his father's funeral. The 1,000 small kindnesses that made up a marriage, the coffee she brought him in bed, the way she always remembered to DVR his favorite shows, how she'd leave sticky notes with smiley faces in his briefcase. He thought about the past few months, reinterpreting every moment through this new lens. Elena's distraction hadn't been about falling out of love, it had been about drowning in secrets. Her emotional distance hadn't been rejection, it had been shame and fear and the impossible weight of trying to be daughter, sister, and wife to people whose needs conflicted. His phone rang. His mother. Michael, your father and I are at Marcello's. We've been here 20 minutes. Weren't we supposed to celebrate your anniversary tonight? Michael had completely forgotten. Mom, I'm sorry. Something came up. Elena and I had to postpone. Is everything all right? You sound strange. Michael found himself sitting on a park bench, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. Mom, can I ask you something? How did you and Dad make it 52 years? His mother was quiet for a moment. That's a complicated question, sweetheart. Why do you ask? Just humor me. Well, she began, your father and I have hurt each other plenty over the years. He had a gambling problem in our 30s that nearly bankrupted us. Did you know that? What? No. He kept it secret for 2 years. By the time I found out, we were $60,000 in debt. I was so angry I moved into your grandmother's house for a month. Michael sat up straighter. I never knew that. We don't advertise our lowest moments, his mother said gently. But they happened. Your father lied to me, betrayed my trust. I had to decide if that mistake defined him or if he was bigger than his worst moment. I chose to believe he was bigger, and he spent the next decade proving me right. What if he hadn't? What if he'd lied again? Then I would have left. But Michael, here's the thing, trust isn't about never being hurt. It's about believing that the person you love is capable of growth, of change, of being better than they were. And it's about being willing to take the risk of being hurt again because the alternative, a life without that person, is worse. After they hung up, Michael sat for a long time, watching couples walk by hand in hand, listening to the city's nighttime symphony of traffic and distant music. He thought about Elena upstairs in that hotel room with her newly discovered sister, trying to build something from the rubble of family secrets. He thought about her face when he'd burst in, not guilty, but startled and afraid of losing him. Finally, he stood and walked back to the hotel. The 4th floor was quiet again. He knocked on room 412, knowing Elena had probably already left, but needing to check. Sophie opened the door. Mr. Hayes. Is she still here? She left about 10 minutes ago. She's pretty devastated. Michael nodded, then surprised himself by asking, Can I talk to you for a minute? Sophie stepped back, letting him in. They sat in the same positions they'd occupied an hour earlier, but the energy was different now. Tell me about her, Michael said. What's Elena like when she's with you? Sophie smiled, a genuine warmth entering her expression. She's funny. Funnier than I expected. And she's a good listener. She asks all these questions about my life, my childhood, like she's trying to fill in 33 years of missing context. She's also fiercely protective. When our mother started making demands, Elena shut it down immediately. Said she wasn't going to let me be a secret anymore. That sounds like her, Michael said softly. She loves you desperately, you know. She showed me your wedding photos, told me about how you met, how you proposed. She lights up when she talks about you. Sophie paused. She also told me she doesn't deserve you, that she's ruined everything. I told her that's not true, but I don't know if she believed me. Michael stood to leave, then turned back. For the record, I'm glad Elena found you. I'm glad you exist. And I'm sorry our reunion got caught up in all this mess. Sophie's eyes glistened. Thank you. That means more than you know. Michael drove home through streets that felt both familiar and strange. When he pulled into their driveway, every light in the house was on, Elena's habit when she was anxious. He sat in his car for several minutes, watching their home, thinking about all the moments that had happened inside those walls. When he finally went in, he found Elena in the kitchen, still in her clothes from earlier, making tea she probably wouldn't drink. She turned when she heard him, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood there, an ocean of hurt and confusion and love between them. "I'm not going to pretend this doesn't change things," Michael said finally. "Because it does. You lied to me, Elena. 4 months. And that breaks something fundamental." She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "I know. But," he continued, and her eyes met his, "I also understand why you did it. Not excusing it, but understanding it. And I've been thinking about what matters more, punishing you for your worst moment, or believing you're capable of better." "Michael. Let me finish." He moved closer, but still didn't touch her. "I hired that investigator because I thought you were having an affair. I was so sure I knew the story. I was so ready to be the righteous, betrayed husband. But life isn't that simple, is it? People mess up. They make terrible choices for complicated reasons. They hurt the people they love not because they don't love them, but sometimes because they love them too much to risk losing them." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "I was so afraid of losing you. And instead, you almost lost me anyway by not trusting me with the truth." Michael finally closed the distance between them, gently taking her hands. "Elena, I can't promise I'll get over this quickly. I can't promise there won't be moments when I doubt you. But I don't want to lose what we have over something we might be able to fix." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I choose us. I choose to believe you're more than your mistakes. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. No matter how difficult, no matter how complicated, no matter who asks you to keep them. We face things together or we don't face them at all." Elena pulled him into an embrace, her body shaking with sobs of relief and remorse. "I promise. I swear to you, Michael, never again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in their kitchen while the tea grew cold and the night deepened outside. It wasn't a happy ending, those only exist in stories simpler than life. But it was a beginning, a choice to try again, to rebuild what had been damaged. "We're going to need therapy," Michael said into her hair. "Yes," she agreed. "Lots of it. And you're going to meet Sophie openly now. No more hiding." "Yes. She'd like to meet you properly. If you're willing." "I am." Elena pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his face. "I love you. I've loved you since the moment we met. And I will spend the rest of our lives proving that you made the right choice tonight." Michael kissed her forehead. "We both made the right choice." Later, as they lay together in bed, not in the guest room, but in their room, where they belonged, Elena asked, "What made you come back? What changed your mind?" Michael thought about David's story, his mother's wisdom, the lonely walk through city streets. "I realized that I'd rather be with you, imperfect and flawed and capable of mistakes, than be right and alone. I realized that the story I'd written about us, the betrayed husband, the unfaithful wife, it was too simple. And we're more complicated than that." "We are," Elena agreed. "God, we really are." Outside their window, the city continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere out there, Sophie was packing for her flight home, carrying with her the hope of a sister relationship that no longer had to be hidden. Somewhere, David Chen was filing away the strangest case of his career. And somewhere, Elena's parents were carrying their secrets, unaware that their daughter had finally chosen her truth over their shame. In that bedroom, Michael and Elena held each other, two people who had faced the worst thing they'd imagined and found something unexpected on the other side. Not absolution, not perfect trust restored, but something perhaps more valuable, the willingness to try again, to choose each other not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. It was still their anniversary. Just not the one either of them had expected.